Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
We were, Mr. Agrizzi, at paragraph 13.9 of your statement, and you were about to relate to the Chair the calculations of monies, cash monies, referred to in paragraph 13.9 and 13.10.
Correct. Chair, if I can take you through a very rough calculation,
Yes.
because what you've got to consider, as I said, I'm under oath and I don't want to be quoted and give the wrong figures. So what I'd like to just explain is that because these costs went through as operational expenses, they would dilute your profit margins when you reconcile your books at the end of the day. And obviously company tax would be affected. So in effect, it was defrauding the revenue services.
SARS, yeah.
So if you just calculate, if you take 4 million rand in cash over 12 months, and I just took 9 years, it comes to about 432 million rand. Of that 432 million rand, which was absorbed into cost of sales, in effect, company tax at 28% gives you 120,960,000 rand tax evasion. Now, at this stage, I can't give a final figure. They would need to do a full audit on this, and I would gladly assist in the audit process of SARS or the Hawks or the SAPS or whoever it might be.
Yeah, okay, okay.
But for present purposes and simply put, in large amount, the payment of cash bribes was accounted for as company expenses to the receiver of revenue.
Correct.
In paragraph 13.12, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with another method used to generate cash. Would you relate that, please, to the Chair?
What happened, Chair, if I may explain it in detail and give you the background, we were very involved and we had bought a company called F&R Bogisa, and it was a repair shop type company. And they had a fuel station in Belfast, in Witbank area. Bosasa would basically collect all the cash that was in the forecourt that motorists would use to pay for fuel. And Bosasa would then reimburse the fuel station and basically run an account. So run an account for the cash that was taken and replace that with an EFT. And this was reflected in the expenses as well of Bosasa.
All right. So as far as the fuel station is concerned, it would receive money in cash.
Correct.
From the motorists.
Correct.
It would give that cash to Bosasa.
Correct.
It would not be out of pocket because it would be reimbursed.
That's correct.
By Bosasa by way of EFT transfer.
That's correct.
So instead of having cash, it had money accounted for through an EFT transfer.
That's correct.
But for its troubles, Bosasa then had cash.
Correct. I'll just recall the name of the person that was responsible on a daily basis to go and fetch it, and I'll make a note of it and give it to the Commission.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Now, you've told the Chair that the details of these transactions, their calculation or the calculation of the value of these transactions, the people involved, is a matter of detail, and in relation to any investigation that might arise, you're willing to cooperate.
Most definitely, Chair.
But from your own knowledge, from your rising out of your duties at Bosasa, and given your position in Bosasa, when these transactions were effected, you have personal knowledge of these transactions having taken place?
I do, most definitely.
All right.
If I can add, Chair?
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of, because of time, we did not have time to put everything in. There's a whole
Yes.
lot more that'll come out as time goes on.
Yeah, well, I must just say that I have seen in parts of your statement, your affidavit that is before me, where you have indicated that you can give more details and more information. I have no doubt that the legal team and investigators of the commission will pursue that to see what can be made out of that information. So all information that you may have that is relevant to what we are doing, we want to know. Thank you.
As I understand it, I'm sorry, did I interrupt an answer, Mr. Agrizzi? As I understand it, Mr. Agrizzi, you have a large amount of documentation.
I have given the documentation, that is correct. It is in safekeeping, it was subpoenaed, and it is with the Commission at the moment.
In fact, boxes of documents,
That's correct.
as well as electronic information.
With all the hard drives, yes.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you very
paragraph 13.4, Mr. Agrizzi, contains another method used by Bosasa to generate cash. Again, you talk about it at a general level. Would you describe to the Chair the method referred to here?
Chair, one of the mechanisms used was to, if a client approached, especially with the youth centres, if they approached for assistance, as they put it, with elections or with electioneering, they would approach us, and normally the youth centre management would come to me and say, look, person X has approached us and they need X amount. And they're prepared to pay for software or a fence or whatever that needs to be provided. So basically, we would supply software programs. Now, these software programs actually didn't cost anything because they'd been done already. So it would be invoiced as a software program, and let's just say, for example, the program would be invoiced out properly as the relevant documentation.
To the youth centre.
From the youth centre to the client. The client would arrange to sign it off, and the client, whoever signed it off, and the person that requested the money, the part of the monies would be retained by Bosasa and the youth centre. The other part would be paid in cash to the official. Now, a prime example of this is in the Northwest Province. And I do, if I recall correctly, I do know that there was an investigation at one time, but I wasn't privy to it at all.
Can you say when this would have occurred?
This occurred about 5 years ago.
You refer to electioneering. Did I hear correctly?
Correct.
Yeah. Are you talking about certain elections in certain parties, political parties? Are you talking about elections, country elections like we are going to have and like we had in 2014? Or what are you talking about?
I think these are more regional elections. So
that would relate to a particular party? Or
unfortunately, yes.
Okay. And would this happen with a particular political party, or would it happen with different political parties?
No, it was one specific political party, Chair.
And it happened on a particular occasion, not it happened over time?
I think it happened quite often over time.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's no secret that there was a reason for that, to support that specific funding of elections and that type of thing.
Well, is that something that's still coming up, or is
No,
that?
perhaps what we should do, Chair, is test the extent of the witness's knowledge,
Yeah. Okay. Do
the
you want?
remoteness or directness of the knowledge.
Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
But if I may just precede that with understanding the scheme and where the various
Yes.
spheres of influence would lie. To describe the process of cash generation first, and we'll come to this issue afterwards. A youth development centre
Yes.
being administered and run by Bosasa,
Yes.
in fact owned by Bosasa.
In one instance, it is owned, the facility, and that is the Mogale Youth Centre, Chair.
Okay. They say to Bosasa, and this is all arranged, of course, we need a software program.
Correct, Chair.
And Bosasa then supplies a software program.
Correct.
This has either been costed in the expenses already, or it's provided at no cost to Bosasa.
That is correct.
The Youth Development Centre, do I understand it, then pays Bosasa for the provision of that service?
That's not correct. What happens is the Department of Social Services and the relevant person responsible there would pay Bosasa for the software.
And it's the, yes, I understand, it's the department responsible for the provision of that service ultimately through Bosasa.
Correct.
It would then pay the amount to Bosasa.
That's correct. It would be
And
paid.
the department, I think you said, of social services you are talking about, is it the government department of social services, or is it some unit or department in a company?
It is the South African or the Northwest or the Cape Town Department of Social Services and Development.
Okay, thank you.
So this money is paid and received by Bosasa,
That is correct.
ultimately for no value.
That is correct.
Part of the money, I understand, would be retained by Bosasa,
That is correct.
and part would be paid to whom?
Would be paid to the individual that had requested the funding.
So this whole scheme or arrangement is in order to provide cash to someone else,
That's correct.
an official who requested cash.
That's correct.
Now, you've said that the reason or the underlying motive for the whole arrangement of the provision of cash was, as you described it, for elections.
That was the excuse given to me, Chair, by the people who worked at Bosasa Youth Development Centres.
So someone, either the official at the Youth Development Centre or someone else, initiates this transaction through a request to Bosasa.
That's correct, Chair.
And you say that the motive or the reason, therefore, you know, and that's what we're going to test now, is the funding for elections. How do you know that? Is this something that you know? Is it something that you can reliably testify to? Or is it conjecture on your part?
It's definitely
You
not.
don't want to hear conjecture.
It's definitely not conjecture. I think, Chair, I've made it very clear that I will be totally frank, honest, and open. I will not conjure up anything. And I think that the important part with regards to what I was told and what was requested, I can confirm it, that it was Sivian Dlamini from Bosasa that requested that I attend a meeting at I'm giving you one example of the Northwest. I would attend a meeting at the stadium that was built in Rustenburg. I can't recall the name right now, but I attended a meeting there and the MEC was present with me. I cannot recall the name. At that meeting, I was told it's for electioneering, and that's why I've made mention of it.
Would the MEC that you are talking about that was present, would it have been an MEC responsible to the extent that a provincial government might have this, I'm not sure, for social services, as you understood.
Chair, I don't have the best memory. My understanding was it was a lady and she was responsible for social development in the Northwest.
Okay, thank you.
Now, before you tell the chair of the final destination of this money for elections, just tell the chair on what you base such knowledge. You say there was a meeting.
Correct.
What did this meeting have to do with these monies generated at paragraph 13.14 of your statement?
That specific meeting that I attended, I was asked to attend. At that meeting, the request was made.
The request for cash,
Correct.
and it was made by whom?
I cannot recall the lady MEC's name, but what I can tell you is that Sivian Dlamini was present and he will recall the person's name because he ultimately handled the delivery as well.
So involved in this transaction was the person who requested it, an MEC, and Sivian Dlamini.
Correct.
All right. Let's take
Was
it.
Mr. Dlamini from the youth center of Bosasa or not?
He's, I believe, a director of Bosasa Youth Development Centres.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you.
Right. Well, perhaps it is safe to ask the following question, Chair, and I'll be guided by you because ultimately you're in charge of the leading of evidence. I'm not passing the buck, Chair, but do you know whether Mr. Dlamini and the MEC that you've referred to had connections with any particular political party?
Yes, I do.
Yes. And what is the political party?
I wouldn't. Do I have to say it, Chair?
What is your answer to my question?
My answer to your question is it's the ruling party.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go to paragraph 13.15, please.
I don't know whether you have finished on this. Have you or haven't you?
Well, there's more detail in relation to the allegations in 13.14, in paragraph 13.15,
Okay.
but I've completed 13.14. Chair.
Okay, let me ask. Now, this transaction that you have just given evidence about,
Yes,
did
Chair.
you say it took place about 5 years ago, or are you not able to remember the year?
Chair, I'm sure the investigators can actually perhaps check
Get the information,
that
yes.
information with the hotel
Yes, okay.
because I've used my credit card there, my company
Yes.
credit card, and they
Yes.
please if they can pull my company credit
Yes.
card
Yes.
history, they will see the hotel
Yes.
and where I actually
Yes.
was.
Okay. Now, the election, as I understand you, and you must just tell me if I misunderstood you, the election in connection with which this money was requested was to be in the Northwest, and your understanding was that it was a regional election, but when you say regional, I don't know whether you mean provincial or you mean something of less than a province or local government, or you can't, you are not sure.
I'm going to try and jog my memory
Yes.
and try and
Yeah.
remember. It seems to be coming back to me now. There's a couple of
Yeah.
stories around it that
Yeah.
I will jot down and then ask the
Yes.
investigators to look
Yes.
into.
But in effect was, as you understood the purpose of this money, was it to help somebody or a political party in their election campaign or in his or her election campaign? Was that your understanding?
That was my understanding.
Yes, okay, all right, thank you.
All right. In paragraph 13.15, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with the Northwest Youth Development Facilities, and you refer to transactions happening on numerous occasions. Would you just describe what you're referring to in that paragraph for the Chair, please?
So, Chair, one of the ways that it started becoming very prevalent in the Northwest was that special pre-opening expenses were levied on youth centres. Now,
What is
normally
a
those
pre-opening expense? Would you just describe it, please?
well, a pre-opening expense is normally when you get handed over a facility and you need to buy equipment, S&T, that type of thing. So you levy an opening expense to be able to afford that. Now, in certain cases, the costs of the fencing and security systems that were implemented were highly inflated. So the department paid much more, and the agreement was that the person negotiating these payments, Mr. Sivian Lamini, who was the director of the Bosasa Youth Development Centres, would actually sort out or pay the people.
When
I
you
would
say
merely-
to pay the people, would you be a bit more specific, please?
Well, I don't know who the actual people were, but Sivian Lamini would pay the responsible officials in the Department of Youth Development Centres, in government, in social services. So I would, what I did was I just waited until I saw that what they were telling me was true, that the company wasn't being defrauded, and that if they prepared an invoice for 2 million rand pre-opening expenses, I expected it to be paid before they paid anything out.
So once you had been reassured that Bosasa hadn't been defrauded, cash was paid out, someone else was defrauded, is that right?
Yes, the department of
And-
government.
And that was the government department that had paid for non-existent expenditure or inflated costs for services provided.
Correct, we the taxpayers paid.
Right. You receive the money and then you pay out cash, and by you I mean Bosasa.
Correct.
And is that the cash that you refer to in paragraph 13.16 and about which you've now testified, money required by, as you say here, individuals for elections?
That is correct.
So somebody within the relevant government department would have known the true nature of this transaction, is that correct?
That is correct.
So somebody within the relevant government department would be party to the payment of taxpayers' money to Bosasa for non-existent programs, and so that Bosasa could then pay the money or part of the money to somebody or a political party to support their election campaign. That's the bottom. That's what happened. What's happening?
Well, that's what we were told.
That's what.
That
Yes.
it was the political party.
Yes.
I just want to clarify one issue, is that you must remember that there was a software system that was developed. It was ready, it was developed. It's as good as if I go to your car and I take out your navigation disc and I sell it back to you. That's basically what it was. The car comes with navigation. Why on earth would you now charge for a navigation disc? So when I mean something wasn't delivered, was there was no additional expense to getting that delivered there. You were sold the product and you were overcharged for the product, in effect.
Well, what I want to try and understand is whether the person or persons from the relevant government department who would authorize the payment of money to Bosasa for this transaction, whether they knew or are likely to have known that really there's nothing to pay for. It's just to facilitate a certain transaction. You might not be able to answer that.
I can't answer that. I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. Let's digress for a moment to deal with the issues in paragraph 13.
I'm sorry. Of course, if you did what you just said, if you were to do in my car, take out a navigator and later put it back, if I paid, I would know that I'm not getting any value.
Sorry to use that kind of example,
Yeah,
but that's the truth.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, except that the Youth Development Centre might report to the official concerned that value had been received.
Well,
Because there was a disguised transaction, a request for software or a...
and the software would be there if you wanted to see it. So, Chair, it was there. So if the auditors came to check on it, software is something that you cannot quantify the value of.
So there is room that, excuse me, there is a room that somebody's explanation might be, I thought we got value, I thought we were paying for something that's of value, but maybe it turns out I was mistaken or something.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we deal, Mr. Agrizzi, with the issues you raise in paragraph 13.17 and 13.18? And in essence, what you deal with here is why it would be difficult for any audit or anyone looking at the books of the company to recognize that there was something amiss. And you talk here about the cash drawings in the books of the company related to the turnover or the amounts in the books of Bosasa as a whole. So would you just deal, please, with the issues raised in paragraph 13.17 and 13.18?
Well, Chair, I've alluded to some of the most prevalent mechanisms of handling cash.
We'll do more.
There are some more coming through, but the most important thing was these were always reflected as run-of-the-mill costs. So if you look at the percentage in relation to turnover, it's really a drop in the ocean. Because what happens is if you take, for instance, the 4.5 million rand that is required out of one contract, let's take the average purchases and salaries of Bosasa and amounted to, say, that's excluding, sorry, it should be excluding salaries and wages, would amount to 88 million rand per month. Now, if you take 4.5 million rand and divide that just into 88 million rand, it's a minuscule amount, it's 5.5%. Now, bearing in mind that the profit margins at Bosasa are exceptionally high, industry related, if you comparative to industry, it's unique. We are always able to make exceptionally good profits as a company. And so if you look at it in the profit terms, your profits would still reflect 28 to 35% net profit before tax, even after you have paid out 4.5 million rand through the books. Why would an auditor query that? It's a well-run business. So in actual fact, if I can just go back there, the profit should have reflected, say, 32 or 33 or 34%, but they were reflecting 28 to 32%. So the auditors were amazed, they were happy, and anybody would be happy as a shareholder as well with that kind of return on investment. So it didn't raise eyebrows at all. And the main reason for this is because of the good pricing we were able to negotiate with, for instance, correctional services. the extensions we were able to get. So that facilitated that to a large degree. And then in November, December, when it was Christmas shopping time, and obviously you'd use more cash because more cash would be requested by Gavin Watson, the 2 or 3% fluctuation there would really be explained as a public holiday or expenses over a public holiday. So the whole idea was to show the auditors and the submission of tenders, the bid adjudication committees, if they looked at our numbers and they did an analysis, was to show a smooth graph. You see, if it was consistent every month, it was fine. But as soon as you have a spike, that's what it attracted attention. Now, the way we managed it would be very, very difficult for an auditor, even a forensic auditor, to actually pick it up, unless you knew the system itself.
You refer to public holiday costs over the December period. What is a public holiday cost?
Public holiday costs were your overtime costs, really. But what people forget as well is that over public holidays you have certain savings. So people don't do as many visits and all that. So it actually really balances out, Chair. What happens is that if you have a query on why did your costs go up over December by 3%, so your margins and your profit dropped down to 25% where they should be 28%, the argument would quite simply be given, well, it was public holidays, we spoilt the people, we gave them bribes, bribe packs, that type of thing. Could be easily explained.
All right. And just formally, Mr. Agrizzi, you say the word in the first line of paragraph 13.18, including, should read excluding.
I would like to verify that because, I haven't been there for so many years, but my recollection is that that is excluding.
All right. Well, we'll have a look at that during an adjournment and correct if necessary.
Correct.
Mr. Pretorius, did we cover when Mr. Agrizzi was dealing with this transaction that entailed him going to a stadium in Northwest, did we cover the question of what amount was involved? I don't seem to have picked that up. If we haven't, maybe he can assist us in that transaction.
Yes. I'll deal with it. Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 13.14 and 13.15, as well as 13.16, you describe a general method of generating cash.
Yes.
And as you say, we'll deal with specific examples in due course. But for the present, you spoke of one transaction that was discussed at a meeting in the Northwest to which you referred, and you've given detail to the Chair. Can you estimate the value of that particular transaction?
Chair, the transaction, if I recall, or try and recall correctly, was about 3.4 million rand.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
If I can clarify as well, of the 3.4 million rand, I think the cash paid out to the individual was about 1.8 million.
Okay, thank you.
I can't recall the exact number.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to paragraph 14 of your statement and affidavit. The Chair will recall reference to the Lindela repatriation facility. This appears to be, from your statement, another method of cash generation. Would you describe that, please, to the Chair?
Chair, we at one stage had a very close community at Lindela. So nobody could really go out and buy out and that. And one thing about undocumented migrants is they retain their money and they keep their money. So at any one stage, you would have up to 800 to 1 million rand in safekeeping for them. But the one thing that they do want to do is to buy additional foods and groceries at the canteens, which we managed and ran as well. So they would like to spend cash for that. Now, these were very well priced comparatively and that, but the average takings would be about 300,000, and it went up. It
Per what period?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, you say the average takings were 300,000 rand?
Correct.
For
They
what
were well
period?
over 300, 350, sometimes even 400,000 rand
Per day, month, year? Per month?
per month, yes. All right, but this wouldn't all be reflected as revenue. So what would happen is the grocery items would be expensed, the cost of sales, in the cost of sales, and the cash would be taken over to Gavin Watson's safe, with a small amount being declared as revenue, maybe 10 or 15% of the actual. So that was one way of generating cash. It wasn't a big way. This only happened in early 2000, and then the cash requirements became much greater with the correctional services contracts and all the other contracts.
Okay,
The other method was the use of these prepaid cell phones. So detainees were purposefully not allowed to take their cell phones into the facility, and they would have to use cell phones that were fixed lines that were in a store kind of pay-as-you-go type environment where they could then phone from there.
Again, I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah, no, you may continue. Thank you.
Again, just to summarize, at the Lindela repatriation facility administered by Bosasa,
Correct.
there would at any one time be several thousand people resident there or detained there. They would make cash payments to tuck shops and canteens, or to Bosasa for the use of cell phones at the facility. That cash would be retained and delivered to Bosasa for its use.
Correct, Chair.
The cost of those sales, for example, the cell phone costs and the canteen costs of the food and groceries there, was nevertheless expensed in the books of Bosasa as an operational expense.
That is correct, Chair.
All right. Can we move on then to cash bars and canteens? A similar method of cash generation is described here. Would you tell the Chair about it, please?
Chair, if I may just give you the history. We used to manage numerous mining hostel in the mining hostel days, and we would have bars and canteens there, which were actually very lucrative. And only a certain amount of those cash takings would actually be declared for revenue purposes. Exactly the same as Lindela, this would be expensed through the company, and the money would be collected. As a matter of fact, we had a special CIT team, they were called Cash in Transit team, that would go and collect the monies from the various facilities and then bring it back to Gavin's vault. And there was one person allocated to count it and to put it in the safe and administrate it.
Right, and that cash was used for the purposes you say here that you've described to the Chair previously in your evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Then, for how long did this practice in relation to the hostels continue, or did it at a time cease, and why?
Well, Chair, this practice dwindled in 2003, 2004, I think it was, when Bosasa sold off the mining contracts. It might have been 2002, 2003. I'm not 100% sure. But we sold off the mining contracts at that stage to a gentleman by the name of Greg Lake and Allen, and that was with Equality Foods. So they sold it off, and he took over those contracts. It happened up until then.
You say in paragraph 16.1, under the head cash drawings, that during the period 2003 to 2004,
Yes.
and as a result of the fact that the bars and canteens used to generate cash had been sold as part of the sale of the mining contracts, as you've just now referred to, other arrangements had to be made to sustain cash income. And then you describe in paragraph 16.2 and following that further method. Will you tell the chair about that, please?
Well, as a result of the cash bars and the canteens and that being sold off as part of the mining contracts, special arrangements were then made to sustain the cash income to be able to use to pay out. And that is when, and we mentioned it earlier, we actually resorted to writing out casual wages, because at that time there was also a lot of building work taking place. I was in the process of renovating the offices and extending and doing quite a lot of building work. So the people in accounts took advantage of that and processed casual wages through there and issued out cash checks. And obviously, no work was done for the amount. If there were 10 people working, 100 people would be invoiced out as casual workers.
So were these ghost workers?
Yes.
And in paragraph 16.3, you say that one method of disguising, I presume you mean here, the expense was to allocate them to certain facilities under construction. Would you tell the chair about that, please?
Well, there were two facilities at the time, and one of them was being redeveloped for a halfway house for child awaiting children. The other one was being redeveloped for a reintegration facility. And basically, there was a lot of work that took place there. So we would invoice out, or not invoice out, but we'd pay casual wages to ghost workers out there for those facilities. And at that stage, it could be attributed to the work that was actually being done there by the builders as well. So the chances are that it would be picked up by the revenue services was very, very slim. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. In paragraph 16.4 then, you go on to talk of risks, and please tell the chair about what occurred here that you're relating to. The chair.
Chair, I was a bit concerned about the practice because it was extremely risky. I knew what they were doing, I knew how they were doing it, and I was concerned. So specifically on one day, why I was concerned was because there was a junior lady that would go and do it with one of the gentlemen. And why I was concerned was because people are killed for much less money. So how do you on earth allow a lady to transport or carry this amount of money around? So I went with them to see now, how do they do it? So I could understand it for myself. And so they would make up 3 checks, and they would go to the bank, phone the bank first and say, look, we come in, they go to the bulk teller. And so I wanted to understand the process that was being followed to draw the cash as well.
Sorry, if I may just interrupt you there. These 3 checks ostensibly were for wages.
Correct. Correct. So the total, I went with them, was 720,000 Rand, which they'd have to pack in a bag, and they would actually carry out the bag out of the bank. I thought it was ridiculous. And eventually I asked them to stop it because it was just too dangerous.
The practice of generating cash through the ostensible payment of wages to workers who didn't actually exist, ghost workers, was that stopped at some stage?
I think it was circa 2003, Chair, that the Department of Labour brought in a ruling that workmen's compensation, UIF, will be paid even for casual labour. I can't remember the exact date, but I do remember that, and because of that, we stopped it immediately, because you would have to pay the UIF on top of the salary and wage as well, and you're paying to a fictitious person.
All right, so because the law required the keeping of records even where casual labour had to be paid in
Correct.
cash, would expose Bosasa to risk.
Correct.
Right, I just want to check something with you, please. You say in paragraph 15.2 that the practice of taking cash from hostels canteens and bars dwindled in 2003 and 2004. Do you see that? You say that in paragraph 15.2.
Correct, I do.
You say then that special arrangements had to be made, presumably you mean after that, for a new scheme to generate cash.
Correct.
You then talk about this ghost worker scheme.
That is right.
But then you say that in paragraph 17.1, the Department of Labour made the payment of casual wages subject to all types of scrutiny in 2003. So I'm just not sure of the casual wages system replacing the other system. What is the time sequence of these schemes? And if you could just try and tell the chair when each scheme more or less was prevalent.
Okay, so up until 2002, we would have the occasional ghost workers. Yes, we would. I mean, that we had. But most importantly was we had sold off the bars and canteens, and the only other way to get cash was through casual wages. But then what happened was UIF kicked in, and we decided then we cannot continue with that. And that's why it was stopped with regards to casual. And also, bear in mind that now we were talking getting up to 2004 when correctional services would need cash. And that was a hungry animal to feed every month. So, and that's why we then changed systems and brought in new systems.
So this casual wage scheme for the generation of cash, the ghost worker casual wage scheme, for how long did that last?
I can't even remember exactly.
Yes, we may look at the dates finally at the end of your evidence.
Would you be able to say whether it was there for most of your time at Bosasa or for less than half the time you were there?
No, less than half the time. Are you talking about, sorry, I'm not understanding what Advocate Pretorius is wanting me to say.
I think he's still on casual wages, is that right?
Yes. No, you see, if one looks at page 31 and 32, and I'll try and be brief on this because it possibly could be cleared up later, you say that the ghost worker scheme was generated after 2003 and 2004.
Correct.
But you say it was stopped as a result of what the Department of Labour did in 2003.
Correct.
So if it started after 2003 and 2004, but ended when the Department of Labour issued its directions or regulations in 2003, the times don't really make sense.
I must be very frank with you, Chair, is that it's a long time ago. It's 15 years, 16 years ago. I can't remember exactly, and I didn't write my affidavit in terms of making sure that these dates, I didn't want to collude anything. I had a limited time, I wrote the affidavit, so there will be errors with dates. But the point is, this is how it happened.
But insofar as the dates are indicative, at least, of general periods, the casual wages ghost worker scheme can't have lasted for very long, as I understand your evidence.
No, for a short time, isn't it?
No, it was
2003, 2004.
I think it was about 6 months or a year. I can't remember exactly.
All right.
That
makes more sense.
You see, Chair, I didn't actually do this.
Yeah.
I'm reporting on it because I know about it.
Yes.
But I didn't actually physically do it. So the person that is going to report on it, and I'm sure you will call him as a witness, will be able to give the detail on it.
Yes. But maybe it would suffice if you are able to say something like, I'm not sure, but it may have gone on for about 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years. So what would be your estimate in terms of that?
6 months.
About 6 months.
Correct.
Early in the 2000s, mid-2000s.
Early in the 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
To be fair to you, Mr. Agrizzi, in paragraph 16.1, you do say in relation to this particular ghost worker issue, that it occurred, I assume it's what you mean here in paragraph 16.1, during the period 2003 and 2004.
Correct.
Can we move then to the heading equal trade in paragraph 18 of your statement? You refer back in paragraph 18.1 to the method of generating cash through the purchase of liquor from jumbo wholesalers. And the Chair questioned you about the quantities of liquor involved. Do you recall that exchange?
I do recall it.
All right. Would you just tell the Chair then of the scheme developed in paragraph 18.1 and why it was developed?
Eventually, Chair, if I may respond, the large amounts of cash via jumbo just were becoming somewhat obvious to the accounting principals and the accounting general staff, because the general staff themselves would say, well, we know there's one person that enjoys expensive whiskey in the company, but there's no ways he can drink this amount of whiskey. So anybody with a little bit of experience would see that it's impossible. This is not true. So further than the fact that we didn't actually use liquor apart from the occasional grape juice for communion, and we didn't need a relationship with jumbo because this was now starting to become a concern. So hence, Jacques van Zyl then approached me about changing the methodology. And they thought through it as a team, as from the accounts team, and they approached me. And the matter of the fact is I actually didn't want to get involved at first. I kind of shunned the idea because I just felt that, I was getting at a stage where I was getting a bit fed up of all of this. And I told him, I said to him, look, I don't want to really know. He approached Gavin Watson with the idea of utilizing an existing supplier that was supplying chicken, frozen chicken portions to the relevant catering operations and on a national basis. So the whole idea and the concept was that Equal Trade also had other businesses which were cash generating. I believe some of them were in the cigarette trade, some of them in the alcohol trade, and some in the betting industry. So they then approached and they said, well, they want to run with it. They want to coordinate it because if they do it, then they know it's safe and it'll stand up to scrutiny. So I left it because I thought, well, you know what, if you guys are controlling it, you're accountants, you're the clever people, you'll be able to manage it. So I let them go ahead and do it. And also, Gavin, just, let them handle it completely. So one thing that Gavin Watson did say was that I would have to remunerate them in cash as a bonus to all of them. And we all know why. Because he needed to raise the living standard so that these people continue to be subservient and just continue to do the work. And so I would have to give them 10,000 Rand a month. And those were Jacques van Zyl, Corinne Dobert, Rika Hundemark, and the Chief Accountant, Carlos Bonifacio.
If you would just pause there a moment, please.
Yes, we can.
How many catering operations approximately did Bosasa have nationally at that time? Can you say?
If I remember correctly, it was, I think, 37.
And does that mean that the volume of poultry that would be dealt with by Bosasa was substantial?
It would be, and I stand to correction, but I think I'm pretty accurate, it would probably be in the region of about 210 tons of poultry a month.
And you say in paragraph 18.2 that you made certain payments on the instruction of Gavin Watson. You do say, and you have just said to the Chair that you weren't too enthusiastic, to put it at its lowest, about this particular transaction.
Yes, I was.
But it seems clear from your evidence that on the instruction of Gavin Watson, you did pay the persons who implemented the scheme money in order to by their loyalty to Bosasa and the scheme.
That is correct. If I can clarify why I wasn't happy about it, well,
Yes.
I allowed it because myself and Greg Lake and Alan had worked previously together, and I found him to be, a little bit untrustworthy, and I just wasn't comfortable. But I said that's why I said they have to control it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, but despite your discomfort, you did make the payments to facilitate the scheme
Yes,
and to reward those implementing the scheme.
correct.
In paragraph 18.3, you refer to another payment. What payment is that?
In 18.3, there was one person who would have to manipulate the system, which is a Microsoft accounting system called Great Plains, and he would get 20,000 rand because he would have to manipulate the stock holdings and things like that behind the scenes so that it wouldn't be obvious to the auditors.
He received 20,000 rand per month in relation to the execution of the scheme.
That is correct.
The extent of your personal knowledge in this regard, did you actually take part in the execution of this process? And if not, where does your knowledge come from?
My knowledge comes from running the business, and I would make sure that I knew every aspect of that business, and I was integrally involved. I'm a committed operational person, and I like to be on the floor involved with the people. So that's where I got a lot of my information from. And though I didn't order or arrange the cash, I was well aware of the process used and the payments made.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I made it a point of every aspect of the business I would know.
Paragraph 19, Mr. Agrizzi, you say briefly how the scheme worked. And you compare the standard process, the correct, lawful, proper process, with the system, fraudulent system that was actually implemented to generate this cash. In paragraph 19.1, you describe the standard process, the correct process, or the lawful process. Would you tell the Chair what that is, briefly?
Chair, the correct process would be, there would be a normal delivery of goods to a site. Let's use Westville Medium A as an example. So Westville Medium A, the supervisor there is Jonas, and the storeman there is Caiaphas. So Jonas and Caiaphas would work out what the requirements would be for the new system. Is this what you're wanting me to explain?
Well, you don't have to go into so much detail,
Okay.
And those names are fictitious names, I presume.
They actually are the names, if
Do
I
you
recall.
know the surnames?
I can't recall the surnames.
All right. In
it's
any event,
3 years ago.
There's a correctional facility, goods
Yes.
are ordered.
Yes. So they would write out a purchase order.
Yes.
They would send the purchase order to the supplier via fax or email, and it's a proper purchase order. And on the purchase order, they would specify the price according to the buying manual which had been issued to them. So there's two comparative things. There's the price and the buying manual. And both of those have to be looked at before they place an order. They would also have to do their planning for the week and say, well, we know we're going to use X amount of chicken. And how they would calculate that is by taking the specification on the spec sheet, which is, say, 200 grams of chicken, times it by 1,000 people, so they knew that they would have to order 200 kilograms of chicken to feed 1,000 people, 200-gram portions. That would be placed with the supplier would then deliver it. So let's say the supplier delivered on the 1st of December, the supplier would deliver, it would go into store. The storeroom manager would basically sign and stamp the order coming in, and the storeman would be countersigned by the unit leader, who would also sign and stamp that the units were delivered and that they were placed on the bin cards. The system would then be that they would capture that invoice, and that invoice would then be sent through to head office a week or two later for payment by the end of the month, or if the agreement was 30 days from statement, by the end of next month.
By Bosasa, payment by Bosasa.
By Bosasa.
Yes, if I may just summarize then.
Yes.
Goods would be ordered by a correctional services facility.
Correct.
Those goods would be delivered and received.
Correct.
A comprehensive recordal system would record quantities.
Correct.
An invoice would then be generated, issued to Bosasa, and payment would be made.
Correct.
That is the proper system, how it should work.
Correct.
What does the fraudulent system involve?
The fraudulent system, Chair, was that an invoice would be sent to Bosasa. No purchase order. The invoice would be sent to Bosasa head office.
Just the invoice?
Just the invoice. Then the head office would get the invoice and make payment. Isn't that nice?
Were
You
any
get paid
goods
with
delivered or received?
No goods are delivered yet.
Either before or after?
No, not at all. What happened was the invoice was sent, and this is where the investigators need to look, because normally you would wait 30 days from statement. Yeah, you were prepaying invoices. The other thing is that the investigators need to understand that there were certain items that were on that invoice, and you're talking, 6 million a month, so you can imagine for yourself, there were certain items that reflect zero-rated, items that are never ever used in a prison, which were rice, beans, and there were various other non-zero-rated items that are not used in a prison. We don't feed beans, and we definitely don't feed rice in correctional centres. So, but because those were non-VAT items, they were utilised.
Yes, you've just left out one sentence, if I may then take it step by step. The fraudulent system, as I understand it, involves the generation and delivery of an invoice to Bosasa.
Correct.
Bosasa then pays this invoice by means of electronic transfer.
Correct.
No goods are delivered, and obviously no goods are received at the facility.
That is
It's
true.
an entirely fictitious transaction.
Totally
Correct.
fictitious.
After payment is made by way of EFT, does Bosasa receive any monies, and how does this happen? How does this happen?
Normally, what we had negotiated with all suppliers, including the same supplier, is that payment is 30 days ex-statement. So remember, you receive goods on the 1st of December, payment is only on the 30th of February, 25th or 26th of February, because it's January to get the invoices together, and then February, and then we make payment. So in the instance of these fraudulent invoices, they are not stamped, and they are prepaid, which is very strange.
All right, so you pay by means of EFT. Bosasa pays this fictitious invoice
Correct.
by the... Does it receive anything in return?
Cash
From whom?
from Equality Foods. They would deliver the cash.
All right. Was there any deduction from the amount of the invoice?
There was a deduction. I cannot remember if it was 12 or if it was 15% as a commission that they would take as well.
And what particular company was involved in the example that you're giving to the chair?
Well, Equal Trade would get the cash from various sources. Some of them would include Tattersalls for horse racing, but I believe most of it was through cross-border liquor transactions and forex transactions. And the benefit for them as well was that they didn't have to bank the cash, and they could then move the EFT into company.
Was the principle used here basically the same principle that was used for transactions with jumbo wholesalers, liquor wholesalers?
Correct.
It was the same principle, just a change of entities involved in terms of the supplier in quotes. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So to summarize, from the point of view of equal trade, they would receive an order, they would invoice fictitiously, they would invoice Bosasa, Bosasa would pay by EFT, and then equal trade would take its own cash and give it to EFT minus its commission.
That's correct.
Right. Do you have the full name of Equal Trade? Is it a Pty Limited company? Is it a business name? What is it?
It's Equal Trade Pty Ltd as far as I can recall.
Right. And then you say these transactions required to avoid scrutiny by the revenue services, and one method used to avoid scrutiny was to include on these fictitious items that would be zero rated for VAT purposes.
Correct.
So there would be no necessity to pay VAT in respect of sales where beans, maize meal, oil and rice are concerned, for example.
That is
was your
correct.
earlier evidence.
That is correct.
Were the amounts more or less the same as the amounts that you were talking about in regard to jumbo liquor wholesalers?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And you say that one anomaly in the scheme, insofar as it involved VAT, is that the standard or the items reflected on the fictitious invoices were often, if not all, standard stock items in correctional services facilities or on their menu plan.
Well, a lot of these were not standard stock items, but that's where one of the errors were later on. So in terms, to avoid SARS scrutiny, those are the items you can use that are non-vatable. So SARS, when they see a non-vatable invoice, they don't even bother, they just pass it on.
Yes. But the transaction could be traced because by investigators, for example, because, for example, if a prison didn't use beans and yet was paying for beans, there would be an anomaly there that would raise suspicion.
Correct. I would assist them in finding the errors and showing them where it's picked up.
You say in paragraph 19.4, however, comparing the standard process to the fraudulent process and looking at the detail of each and every transaction is a detailed and complex task.
Most definitely, if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yes. And you say in paragraph 19.4, but it can be done.
Can be done quite easily.
Yes. And you also say here that you are willing to assist in that investigation process in regard to the detail of the investigation.
Yes, I would.
We're going to move on to paragraph 20, but I, for the present, don't want you to mention any name of any entity. You can talk about AA Wholesalers and Mr. Fenter, but no one else. Okay? Until we feel it appropriate to do so.
Will do.
Would you then, with that word of caution, please describe the scheme referred to under this head?
Yes. I'll do as I'm told.
Yes.
As I've suggested.
There will be a time when the names can be, you can deal with the names. Yeah, okay.
Right. The original introduction to AA Wholesalers was with Piet Venter, who was an accountant and a
Don't mention the name of the firm, please.
And I will not.
Thank you.
I said I would do as I'm told.
Yes, Mr. Agrizzi.
Yes, and basically the introduction was Piet Venter, was with Andries van Tonder. We had a second meeting where Gavin Watson was present and Andries van Tonder, and we actually met at the facility in Lenasia. It's a lovely facility that has got a lot of fridges and mattresses and massive facility, and they do a lot of exporting of goods. At that stage, we wanted to buy a company that would produce a lot of cash. So it would have to be in the retail space and preferably FMCG. And we looked at this facility, and it was decided we could work with them, but that to do an acquisition on that side of the facility was just really not viable, because there was a major culture difference between the two. So the only potential work that we could work with them was we could work out how much cash they collected on a weekly basis, which Mr. Fenton knew, and we could then offer them a check for goods purchased. These goods would be invoiced exactly the same as all the others, as mattresses, because they manufactured them, plastic chairs for Lindela, dishes for Lindela, that type of thing. So that's what the relationship with them was. Certain of the transactions were actually legitimate, and others were just inflated to ensure that the overpayments could come through to us as balances and could come to us at Bosasa as cash. So in all these schemes, one thing I must mention is that Gavin didn't want the directors to initially know that we were embarking on these schemes, and then later on they found out. So we'd embark on it, do it, and then the directors would be told, but not before. Does that cover your...
Yes, well, if I can just summarize, because we're going to move on to a new topic now. This particular scheme in paragraph 20.4, AA wholesalers would provide goods to Bosasa, goods which were used by Bosasa in its business.
There were very little.
Right. They would, however, over-invoice.
That's correct.
Charge you more than they actually provided.
So, Chair, if
more
they
than
charged,
the value of which they provided.
if they charged us for one mattress, 2,000 Rand, they would deliver on the invoice 40 mattresses, of which we only really received one.
So there would be over-invoicing and falsification of the documentation relevant to the transaction.
Exactly like all the other transactions.
And the amount of the over-invoicing and ultimately the overpayment would be returned to Bosasa in cash.
Correct.
So the difference between this method and the other ones we have had is that in this case, Bosasa would get a little bit of something, but would pay much more than
Correct.
that. Yeah, okay.
Right. Now, I'd like to deal, please, with Mr. Venter and circumstances relevant to Mr. Venter's involvement with yourself during 2017.
Yes.
During 2017, what was Mr. Venter doing with you or in relation to yourself and what you were doing at the time?
Well, he was auditing us at that stage, and he was working with taxes and that type of thing. And then what happened was we had not a close relationship, but a business relationship. And are you specifically referring to November?
I'm referring to 2017, and I think it is November, yes. November and December.
Okay. So in November, he was aware that there was disruption within the group at Bosasa, and he wanted to follow suit with the other whistleblowers and report what he had done wrong in the whole process. What then ensued was a meeting with myself and the other whistleblowers. At one stage, we were up to about 22 of them that had all contacted me to come and whistleblow. He had the meeting with me and he commenced working on his statement. So he was allowed to use the facility that I'd provided, and he was working on his statement, and he wrote up a full statement. However, midway during 2017, November, I can't remember the exact date, he had completed his statement, but he had decided he's no longer going to whistleblow because he had been offered a substantial amount of money by Gavin Watson not to whistleblow. And there was a meeting, and there was something about putting his hand on the Bible and swearing before the Almighty that he would not whistleblow, and he has not signed his statement. So we left him. We'd given him the opportunity to join a larger group, which made it more effective. Number one, in terms of being attacked and being threatened. And number two, it was an opportunity to come clean. So he wrote his statement and he just never came back. What then happened was, and he then got cornered, put in a corner by Mr. Watson, and Mr. Watson convinced him over a period of 4 hours that that was not the way to go. And he then called Mr. Van Tonder and said that he's not whistleblowing anymore, purely because he's been, he doesn't know where the money is going to come from and where he's going to live from. Mr. Watson then had him on his side. And then during December, Mr. Van Tonder and myself received a call. Please, guys, can I meet with you before I go away on holiday? So I said, you're more than welcome. I don't got nothing to hide, but you're definitely not meeting me alone. You're going to meet me with somebody else. And at that meeting, which was, I think it was about the 10th or the 7th of December, he then turned around and said, well, he would like to rejoin us. And my words to him were very clear. I said to him, I said, you know, Piet, I understand what your issue is, but I can't guarantee you finances because I've been looking after like 20 families already. I've been supporting them. I've been feeding them. I can't come and give you money. But if you want to come clean and you believe in your heart that it's the right thing to do, then you will do your statement. And I left it at that.
Who was at that meeting?
Andries van Tonder was at that meeting. The meeting was held because I was on my way to go buy some chicken pies at the chicken pie on the way to Lanseria. And it was in the afternoon at about 2 o'clock. And I made that very clear to him. And I said to him, I said, if you're going to come clean and you want to get this off your chest, then you have to do it your way. I'm definitely not going to support you. I'm supporting enough people already. I can't take you under my wing as well. I'm sorry. And that's what happened. I then received a call from him to say that he had decided, he had spoken to whoever, his wife and that, and he was going to send us the statement signed. I can't remember exactly what day he signed the statement or who attested to the statement, but he had it commissioned and he had it signed. So I said, well, enjoy your holiday, and when you get back, let's just sit and let's go through your statement and make sure that you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. He actually even used a format that I developed because I was asked to develop a format, a structure of the actual document for Andries van Tonder's statement. So he actually had borrowed that one as well. And then he came back and he sent us a statement, which was annexed, he had the annexures and everything to it. And then he came back and he said to us that no, he had met with Gavin again, and this was mid-January, and he had had a life-changing Damascus experience. And he didn't realize we were dealing with dangerous people. Now, I did not take the call, so I don't want to comment on that, and that one of the other witnesses will comment on. What did perturb me was that I was told that he had been shown pictures of one of the other witnesses' nieces that are very close to Andries van Tonder. And that concerned me. And I then told Andries we cut all contact with him because quite simply he is bad news. And I cut contact with him because he wasn't doing it for the right reasons. He was doing it for ulterior motives. And when kids start coming into play, when threats are made and photos are taken of little girls, I have a major problem. I don't add it in my statement, but I can mention to you that I confronted the person that did that. But I won't go there.
All right.
And that's what happened, and that's how we got Andries van Tonder's statement.
So
Sorry, Piet Venter's
Venter's
statement.
statement, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I understand the sequence then very broadly to be, and there may be more detail in due course. Piet Venter was part of a group of contemplated whistleblowers working with you.
That is correct, Chair.
Pursuant to that, he was preparing a statement recording matters relevant to the whistleblowing exercise.
That is correct, Chair.
He met with you and one other in December. Well, before that, he stated his intention to withdraw from the whistleblowing exercise.
That is correct.
However, he came to you early December and one other and said he wished to rejoin the whistleblowing exercise in collaboration with the rest of the group.
That is correct.
You told him then, well, if that is so, please turn your statement into a sworn affidavit.
That is correct, Chair.
That happened during the December period.
That is correct.
On his return in January, he came back to you and said, no, he no longer wished to be part of the group.
That is correct, Chair, and I'd like to add there.
Yes.
At that time as well, there were rumours going around that I'd forced him to make a statement.
Yes.
At that stage, he was in Mossel Bay on holiday. I was in Dainfern.
Okay.
All right. We'll come to that detail in a moment. If you look at Annexure F on page 252, that's in Exhibit S1. Chair, the status of this affidavit, the information contained in this affidavit will, I'm informed by the investigators, be a matter of some controversy. In order to deal with that controversy, it's necessary to go through the contents of the affidavit, and in particular to deal with the references to Mr. Agrizzi, if there is such a reference to him in the affidavit. Nevertheless, I would like to deal with this affidavit on the basis of establishing from the witness the circumstances which to his knowledge surrounded its delivery to him, its signing, what happened before, what happened afterwards in relation to the whistleblowers, and what he knows of the correctness of the facts contained here. So we don't necessarily rely on this affidavit to prove the facts in the affidavit, certainly at this stage. That may happen later. But at this stage, it's merely to say, Mr. Agrizzi, what do you say about the fact referred to here? Is it true and correct?
That's fine.
Thank you. All right, so if we can go to page 252, please. Do you have it there? Do you recognize this document?
I do.
Is this the affidavit of which you've spoken?
That's correct.
Please go for a moment to page 266.
You said you
their
should go
signature?
to, I'm sorry? You said
266.
266.
Correct. I'm there.
Do you see a signature there
Yes, I do.
under the name Petrus Stephanus Venter?
That's his signature.
Do you know the signature?
It is his signature.
And underneath the signature are the words 19th day of December 2017 at George, Western Cape, South Africa.
Correct.
To your knowledge, at that time, 19 December 2017, where was Mr. Venter holidaying?
He was in Mossel Bay, I think he mentioned, or George close by.
All right. And if you look at the bottom of the page, 266, you will see the affirmation on oath, signed and sworn, stroke affirmed to me at, and I can't read those words, I don't know if you can. but there's a date there, 18 December 2017.
Correct.
And at the bottom of the page is a signature of a Commissioner of Oaths. And at the bottom of the, further down at the bottom of the page, full names, status, I think it's warrant officer, and a street address in Mossel Bay.
Correct.
I think it's Mossel Street. And that is repeated over the page on page 267.
Correct.
Do you see that?
Correct.
So on the face of it, at least, this affidavit was attested to in December 2017 in the Western Cape or Eastern Cape, I'm not sure. Mossel Bay and George are in the Western Cape. But they're in the Cape,
Yes.
far from Gauteng.
Correct.
At this time, where were you?
I was in Daneford.
All right, let's go back to page
Sorry,
250.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Daneford in 4 ways, and on that specific day, on the 18th of December, I can actually get witnesses that witness that I was actually alongside the pool with having a bribe with my brother
In Gauteng.
in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Yes, there's also the 19th, but for the moment you were in Danefern on both the 18th and the 19th.
Unfortunately, yes.
Mr. Agrizzi, we now need to deal with the contents of the affidavit on the basis that I've spoken to the chair about. Chair, would this be a convenient time? It's 1 o'clock.
Yes, it is. We'll take the lunch adjournment and we'll resume at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
We adjourn.